Hello, nerdy romantics. Today's episode is about Wakanda Forever. The Black Panther sequel, Wakanda Forever, came out in the holiday season of last year. It is now on Disney Plus at this recording time, and we are going to talk about it, talk about how we feel about it, talk about some of the issues in it, and of course, talk about the story and nerd out a little bit about superheroes. And with me here today, I have Marcie, Staci, Dana, Carrie, and we have a new guest host, Corey. And I want to remind everybody that, like we do with a lot of our reviews, there will be spoilers. So if for some reason you have not seen Black Panther Wakanda Forever and you want to see it, please get out from under that log that you are resting under and please go see it and then come back and discuss with us. This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson. Okay, so Black Panther Wakanda Forever. When I saw the first Black Panther, I was just like in awe. I have described it as a life-changing experience for me. And I didn't have a podcast at the time, but now that I have a podcast, I would like to talk about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And I am so happy to have other people that want to talk about this with me. I just need to talk about it with somebody. So, and I'm glad, my friends are here. I'm glad we're going to be able to nerd out a little bit with Perry on this one. And I'm just excited to talk about this. So first off, Corey, because you're new to our audience, you get the first round on these questions on our topics that we're going to talk about. And I wanted to first discuss kind of how you came into this particular, not this franchise, that's Marvel. You can talk about that if you want, but kind of how you came into that whole first Black Panther. How did you find out about it? Are you a fan? And then talk a little bit about your journey back to Wakanda. So, Corey, tell us first impressions about this movie.
Well, thank you, Yvonne. Yes. Okay. So my history with Black Panther, I'm a comic book fan. I've read comics all my life, mainly DC comics, but some Marvel. And I've read a few Black Panther comics, but not until I heard rumors about there being a Black Panther movie. I knew about him, but I hadn't really read too many comics. So I kind of dove down into some graphic novels and read a couple of things and found out a lot about his history and stuff like that. Like a couple of years before the film actually came. I'm also a big film buff and film fan. So, I follow a lot of vlogs and I follow a lot of Twitter followers and stuff like that. We all talk about movies all the time. So I knew that this was happening, and I've also been following the Marvel movie franchise or the movie universe for since the beginning. So all of this stuff started unraveling. I knew that this was getting ready to happen. So the first film I feel like was a cultural phenomenon. It's something that it was like they caught lightning in a bottle. Nobody thought that it was going to have the impact that it did
Yeah,
in the
definitely.
culture. Nobody thought that it was going to have the impact that it did with the Marvel Universe. Nobody thought that it had the impact that it did with just all of film all around, what it did for a lot of African American filmmakers, what it did for a lot of just kids who wanted to be filmmakers, stuff like that. Really was lightning in the bottle. It was a movie that brought people to the movies who hadn't been to the movies in a long time. Talking about like elderly people, elderly families coming together, children, people dressing up, like that whole thing was a cultural phenomenon. Like we don't know when the last time that film actually did that. I don't remember. other than like maybe a Star Wars or something like that,
Right. Exactly.
So for me, it was just something that I think you may have mentioned or something like that is a life altering thing. This is something like you just experience once in a lifetime. I felt that way when I saw it. I think I saw it probably three times in the theater, I believe. And each time I went, it was like you had the exact same feeling over and over. You know how you see a movie more than once, you're like, okay, well, the rating may go down a little bit, or you may not have the same type of emotions you have the first time that you see it. I felt that way every time that I saw it when I went to the theater. My parents
Mhm.
saw it. My parents don't go to the movies often at all. I think it was my dad's number one movie for years. My mom talks about it all the time. So, like, that's life changing for everyone. So I really loved it. I think Chadwick Boseman is someone who, was perfectly cast for that role. I think that it's irreplaceable. I think that there's only a few people who can do that with certain films. They are cast for certain roles and no one else can actually fit those shoes. And I think that they did a wonderful job with what they did with that character. As
Yeah.
far as this sequel goes, do you want me to talk about what I think about the sequel? You want me to continue to tell
Yeah.
you what I think about the whole? Okay.
Yeah, sequel as far as like your first impression. So now you have this cultural phenomenon kind of like you said, lightning in a bottle, which is totally
Yeah.
true. And now you're going into a sequel. What were your first thoughts and everything going into that? Yeah.
So after the first film, I was really excited to see a sequel. With the unfortunate events that happened with Chadwick Boseman, I was extremely nervous. I really did not know what they were going to be able to do to capture that lightning in a bottle again, or something at least close to it. I think that going into this film, I felt like they had extremely difficult and impossible shoes to fill. I don't feel like this film was going to be as successful as the original because it was impossible with the lead actor no longer being there. The
Mm-hmm.
film is
Yeah.
is not just about Wakanda, it's about Chadwick and about T'Challa. That without that, it's impossible. It's impossible to be as good as it was the first one. So I kind of went in with low expectations, but I was still excited because of the promotional stuff that they did for this film. I felt like they promoted it well to let you have that mystique of like how are they going to be able to do this, but then also put enough emotion behind it to make you come and see this film. So
Yeah.
when I went and saw it, I liked it. I can go into further detail, but I liked it, but it's not as good as the original, which I didn't really expect it to be. But there's
Yeah.
there's certain elements that are missing that really don't allow it to carry the weight that the first one did. But I think it's an enjoyable film. I think if you saw the first one, you really care about Wakanda, you really care about the characters, and you care about this culture, that it's important for you to see the second one, to see what Ryan Coogler had to deal with and what he was actually able to achieve.
Yeah, yeah. Marcie, how about you? How did you come into the whole Black Panther? I keep wanting to say franchise, but it's not franchise. But how did you were introduced by the movie, and then what did you think journeying back to Wakanda for the second?
Well, I'm not as big a comic book buff as Corey, but I do have familiarity with the series and some of the graphic novels. So I was excited to see it put on the big screen and given the same presentation as some of the other Marvel heroes have gotten. So I was really excited for the first one and, dressed up for it, went opening weekend. And then, like Corey, had the pleasure of taking my parents to see it and to have my father see a Black superhero on the big screen was fantastic. Bought him the shirt. He was so excited. Bought the DVD for my mom so they would have it, for prosperity because it was just that good. And it was more than I had imagined it would be. So I agree with Corey that losing Chadwick as Black Panther, I think they did the right thing by in the way they handled that loss, because I do think that there was something about what we now understand about his passion for the first film and what it represented for the culture, and to see ourselves so positively displayed in such a large way, that I do think that he was truly a tough act to follow. And so I do think they were coming into the movie at kind of a deficit, just because it was such a hard act to follow with him not being part of it. But I think the way that they honored him was beautiful. And then I was interested to see where the story was going to go, and to see where else they could take us, understanding that in the graphic novels a lot of things have happened and there was more than one Black Panther. So I think they were trying to be true to the storylines that were possible as well. So it was interesting to see that dynamic in the new version in Wakanda Forever. I think that what you bring into it kind of skews your perspective a little bit. People who are in different stages of life experience the film in different ways. In a lot of places, there was the Wakanda Forever experience, but I think that especially coming off of a pandemic and a season of loss, I think it was really cathartic for a lot of people to see someone work through that kind of grief on the big screen, and especially for people of color to see someone work through that was really powerful as well. And so while I do think that it had some opportunities that I hope the next film kind of brings together, overall I enjoyed it. Most second films are kind of rocky, so I guess like Corey, I didn't have the same expectations as one. And truthfully, most twos are kind of like,
Yeah.
because they're trying to find their new footing. So
Right,
I think
exactly.
for a two, it was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. Perry, what about you? What did you think? Well, how did you come into the Black Panther movie and the first movie? And what did you think about first impressions about journeying back to Wakanda?
So, like Corey, I'm a comic book guy, which is why you have me on to talk about comic book stuff all the time. And I came to Black Panther originally through the Avengers comics. He's been an on again, off again member of the team for decades. And I had a friend who had told me that I had to read the Christopher Priest Black Panther run. And it took me a while to get to it. I didn't actually get to it until about 10 years after it started. And then I went back and I read it, and I was just blown away by how good that comic was and how amazing he wrote T'Challa and the supporting cast and Wakanda and all of that. It is all available in graphic novel form. It's like Black Panther by Christopher Priest, the complete collection. It's like 4 volumes, totally worth the price of it. So that was my introduction to Black Panther, and I love that run so much. I went back later to read the Don McGregor stuff, which influenced the first movie. And so I went in with a lot of the comic knowledge, and we had talked about it way early back on my podcast, Superhero Cinephiles. And my late co-host, who was a Black man, he had went around for years telling people, betting everybody who would listen $5 that Hollywood would never have the guts to make a Black Panther movie. So the running joke was he was still had to pay back everybody when it finally came out.
Oh, wow.
And that movie was so groundbreaking in so many ways. I mean, obviously, it's not going to have the same impact on me being a white guy, but I could easily see the impact that it would have on everybody else. But it was more than that. Like, you know, you compare it to some of the other Black superhero movies like Meteor Man or Blade or any of those other ones. And Black Panther was fearless in a way that none of those other movies were. I mean, it tackled themes of race and colonialism in such a direct way. And, you know, wrapping that all up in Killmonger's story, where, you know, I'm watching him on screen and he's one of those, he's like the textbook example of how to write a great villain, because you're watching him and you're like, I don't really think you're doing the right thing, but you got some good points. It's hard for me to disagree with you.
Exactly.
And so and Michael B. Jordan was just brilliant. Going into this movie, I was personally of the opinion that they should have recast, because they've recasted all the iconic white characters. I mean, Heath Ledger died before The Dark Knight even came out, and yet we've already had 4 Jokers since then, if you count the one on Gotham. And so, we've had different Supermen, we've had different Batmen, we've had different Spider-Men. So I always felt that, why can't we have different interpretations of T'Challa as well? But I understand the reasons why they did it, and they gave themselves a creative way to bring T'Challa back at the end, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And like Marcie said, they did have Shuri take on the mantle in the comics, so it made sense for her to step up. I wasn't nervous about the movie going in at all, because one of the things that really impressed me about the first movie was how amazing that supporting cast was. And in fact, when we had talked about it on my show, I had actually made the point that as good as Chadwick was in the movie, I felt he was almost overshadowed at times, but all the other great supporting performances too. So I knew we were in really good footing going into this. So now watching it twice, there's some things that some of the middle part stuff, it gets a little bit slow for me, but overall, I still really like it. It's definitely one of the best of the Phase 4 movies, if not the best. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's nothing else to say. It's just, yeah. Staci, what about you? How were you introduced to Black Panther? And how did you feel as far as the journey back to Wakanda?
Okay, well, I did not have a background in comics for anything. I mean, if anything, if I knew more about the comics, would be X-Men, those before Black Panther.
Yes.
But when they said Black Panther was coming out, I was excited, but it really didn't take hold until I saw, everybody seemed to be talking about it. And when he says about things about the culture, I recall it seemed like when it came out, everybody was taking their church to it. Any kind of group thing.
Yes.
They were taking pictures. Wakanda Forever. Wakanda. Black Panther. Everybody was taking pictures and posting them. And the last time I've seen anything like that was maybe they were doing stuff like for Hidden Figures to take the kids out to see this. But this one was so much different, with everyone dressing up and putting on shirts and wearing all African attire, no matter how much mixed match African attire. But we all were wearing it because we're going to see Black Panther. And
yeah,
it was overall it was a great movie. And I really enjoyed it. But I was that's like Corey, and I think Marcie said that I was a little bit apprehensive, at least for me, for the second one, the sequel that was coming out. And it was really, I was on the fence about recasting, whether they should recast it or not. But how they did it in this movie, okay, I was like, you did a great job. So you wouldn't have to recast it. We can still, spoiler alert, you can still use the same name later on. But overall, the second one was still good. I watched it again last night. So that was the second time for me, but the first time for my parents. And I think overall, if anyone knows my mom, she sat through the whole thing. So, hey, you can tell right there, that's a good movie.
That is a good movie. If you knew her mom, yes.
That she sat through the whole thing and watched it and was into it. And she did ask questions, because my mom doesn't really follow any of the comics or the movies or anything like that. So luckily you can stop and explain certain parts of it. But the fact that she asked and was, well, what about that? It's like, she could tell that she was into it. I mean, I was already into it, but the fact that a person who really can't sit down for anything except for bingo and can sit down through the whole thing, that to me indicates it's a good movie.
Especially considering that it's almost 3 hours long.
Yeah, and I really didn't realize how long it was. Even the second time, we were stopping it periodically so I can explain certain things. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was really 3 hours. It moved. It was very fast paced. But how they did the first one, I mean, again, with the hero villain, and that, is he really a villain?
Right. Exactly.
Like he has some good points. And I'm gonna be honest, when we saw Wakanda Forever, I saw that the villain in the second one had some very good points. And I was, for a while there, when he said we can, I guess spoiler alert, we said we can burn this down. I was like, burn it all down, just burn it all. And I'm like, technically speaking,
Right?
you would be the one being burned, but hey, I'm for you. So I really did enjoy the first one, and by such a Chadwick Boseman did such a great job in the first one that's why I was unsure about we recasting him, but like I said, it was just the other actors in the movie. I mean, his mother, Angela Bassett's character. I mean, every time she spoke, I was like, Queen Mother. She just really commanded every scene she was in, and really the whole cast. They were so good that I'm not saying you don't miss him because you do miss him, but at the same time, they were such good characters, such good forces of nature on the screen that it wasn't as big a gap as I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So overall, like the whole Black Panther, I wasn't really into it. I mean, when it comes to the Marvel, I've watched some of it, but some of it's like I'll watch it because it's another one. But they have never been really something like, oh, I've got to see this. I know it's going to be a good movie. Let me change it. I assume it's going to be a good movie in most cases, but that was the only one that I really wanted to really catch. And then that's the one whose sequel, like when it said they was going to come out, I was like, yeah, I do kind of want to see it, but still apprehensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dana, what about you? How did you first find out about Black Panther, and how did you feel going into that first Black Panther? And now, what were your first impressions when you journeyed back to Wakanda?
Okay, so first, I just want to preface this by saying I'm not a comic book person. The only graphic novels I've ever read, The Walking Dead. And I really just go to the movies for pure entertainment, to get me out of the real world, to laugh, to, get scared, rarely to cry. That's not my thing or whatever. So this is coming from somebody who's not going to have all that language. Some of the people who are a little bit more, I guess, deep in this. So I say all that to say that the only reason I came into the whole Marvel thing is really because Corey was watching these movies and I've watched some of them. I haven't even finished all of the Avenger movies. I still have some of those. And then all the spinoffs, most of them I haven't seen. So that kind of tells you where my mindset is this. So the thing with the whole Black Panther, I didn't know anything about the Black Panther, but as a Black person, you knew the movie was coming. It was all the talk. So it was one of those things that I didn't know anything about him, but I knew that this movie was coming and what it represented. And so I knew that I wanted to go and see it. And so as much as we talk about, hey, we heard the movie was supposed to be good, we wanted to see it, and we want to support as Black people, because that's what we do. We try to support each other. The flip side to that is we support each other because we know stuff like this happens once in a blue moon, sad as it is in the 21st century. And that if we don't go support it, it won't happen again. So while we could make a movie like this and it flop, if it's about non-Black people or people of color, we may continue to make more. I mean, there's some movies I'm like, I can't believe there's a second one, but they got another chance.
Exactly.
Whereas I think for a studio to put this kind of money behind a movie that really is centering around people of color, we knew that we have to support it. Even if I went in that movie and didn't like it, I'm still going to go and spend my dollars to go see it, to show people, hey, this is worth investing in, because people will go and see it. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then, of course, seeing all the people dressing up, that was just total fun, right? Just seeing all the people in their gear stuff. It was, and it kind of reminded me of someone coming to America and some stuff like that, but I'll talk about that later. So the first movie for me was, I got the same feeling that I got when I saw Avatar for the first time. This is a movie that I was just like, wow, the cinematography, the things I was seeing are things that I was not used to seeing. Amazing. And I was just blown away. I wanted to live. That movie could have just been like a Discovery Channel, let's visit Wakanda movie with no villain, nothing. I wouldn't have cared. I just wanted to stay in Wakanda because I was like, what is this place? How do you do what you do? What does everybody do for a living? How does it work? I was in love with it, and obviously it wasn't the biggest part of the movie. So I was excited about 2 because I felt like we were going to spend more time in Wakanda. Then, of course, Chadwick Boseman passed away, and here's where I kind of, again, I know there's some comic background to who's next and all this other stuff, but I'm one of those people that I have a hard time when there are people who feel like they were born to be a certain character. I have a hard time when we replace that character with another person and then try to have them be that same character, if that makes any sense. So, for example, I talk because I'm kind of an old head on this. Superman, when you take the Superman that we grew up, Christopher Reeves, and try to replace him with other Superman who are supposed to be doing the exact same role, there's nothing really different. It doesn't work for me. However, things like the Joker, which I know Perry brought up, was totally different because we took the Joker, the Jack Nicholson Joker that we knew, and when we take it and we bring it into the Heath Ledger, we got a totally different Joker. Yes, they were the same name, but it was a totally different Joker. I can even tell you off the top of my head who came before Heath Ledger and between him, you know, in terms of the Joker. I'm sure I could think about it hard and figure it out. But it was such a different character. And so that's okay to me if you replace, but it's not the same character. So for me, like Iron Man will always be Robert Downey Jr. Like it will be no other Iron Man for me. But as we know, in this movie, they introduced what appears to be an Iron Girl, which I think there's some comics around that or something. I didn't like it. It wasn't my thing. I
mean,
you know, we know how Iron Man became Iron Man. We know his origin story. Iron Girl just, and maybe because she hasn't had her origin story, it just looked like everything was too easy and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. So I'm interested to see what that's going to do. And the same thing like with Black Panther. Now, here's the tricky part, I think, with Black Panther is not only did the writers and the people who produce this have to think about, okay, what the studio execs want. Now we got to think about what the consumers want, but on a different level because their beloved hero has died in real life. So, you know, this isn't just a, hey, we're going to substitute and do somebody. We got to keep something here because I think I'm almost with Perry on this. I think I would have liked to see the Black Panther replaced. But you got to give me something else about him. Like I said, he can't be somebody replaced, but not trying to be Chadwick Boseman. Because what they did do by having the sister wear the suit, and again, I don't know anything about the comics, but it was so unrealistic that it kind of took me, y'all know, it took me out of the movie a little bit because I was too much like, this girl will be knocked over by a breeze of wind. She's never practiced this. She puts on the suit 5 hot seconds, and this is something else they did in the movie at other parts. And now all of a sudden she's got skills. Like I just thought it didn't make any sense. There were way other people there that I felt like could have taken on that role and would have made more sense. Again, I don't know what the comic books say, so maybe that doesn't make sense based on the original storyline or whatever. But for me, that really bothered me because I felt like that was more maybe what the people wanted, but not really where the story logically made sense to go. She doesn't want to be it, and I didn't want her to be it. So I was like, why did we go down this route? I also felt like, I was expecting some major coming to America vibes for the Chadwick Boseman burial scene. And I got some of that. And maybe because I've seen so much in our lifetime. So I guess Coming to America maybe was the first time I've seen something like that. And so it was amazing to me. But I kind of felt like the Black Panther version was a little light on it. I don't know. It was kind of weird. Like I knew we were going to get that because I was joking. That's why the movie is so long because we got to do a 30-minute say goodbye scene. And we kind of did. We did a couple of them, but it didn't trigger me the way I wanted. The thing that got me the most, that was most impactful in this whole movie to me, and believe it or not, wasn't Angela Bassett talking about you taking everything from me, probably because I saw that in a commercial. But honestly, it was the opening to the movie. That whole Marvel word sign with nothing but Chadwick Boseman, it was completely silent. Most beautiful thing about that entire movie altogether. It gave me chills.
Amazing. Yes. Amazing.
So I like Corey and Marcie and probably others. I was nervous going into 2 because most 2s aren't as good as 1. We already set expectations, right? When we go see 1, we don't have any expectations. It's easier to blow our mind. But in 2, now I got some expectations of what things should look like and how it should go. So 2s usually aren't better. So I was worried, but I knew that we would support it because, again, like I said earlier, that's what we do. And we know if we want to see anything else, that will continue to support it. So I'll stop there because I got opinions, but I know everybody else does too. So I'm gonna go ahead.
Well, yes, everybody else does, because you brought up some stuff here. I mean, I've already written some notes, but first, with those notes, I want to ask Corey and Perry to jump in here. So we had a few new characters. And as y'all out there know, I was not a comic book reader, not a comic book fan, but I consider comic books canon, right? So they are the resource information for these movies. And I'm not a purist in the sense that, it has to go like the comic book, but that's my reference point. And I feel like I think she's called Ironheart, the scientist who.
Yeah, Ironheart.
Yeah. So Ironheart, and then Koye the general put on a suit and is somebody there. So is that comic book anything, or did they do this for this movie, or is this more MCU driven now that, yeah.
So Midnight Angel is a real character too, right? Okoye?
Yeah, she takes on that identity in I think it's the Ta-Nehisi Coates run, I believe.
Oh, okay, that one.
And there's a deleted scene that I saw on YouTube that helps explain that a little bit better when she has her final conversation with Shuri. That didn't make it into the movie, but I do think that there were some gaps for non-comic booky people, that people were just showing up and with no introduction. So I do agree with Dana on that part, that unless you had any kind of context, you were like, who are these people? And why is her suit different? And yeah, I feel like some of the deleted scenes should have been post-credit scenes or something, so that we could have gotten some more context.
Yeah, especially considering that, who has a Blu-ray player anymore? I still do, but
I do. I got 4 of them.
There you go.
Hi. Yeah.
I did want to mention about Ironheart, Riri, because I've only read a few of the comics that she's been in, but it seemed like they kind of combined the version in this movie. Almost seems like a combination of another character from the Black Panther comics. So in the comics, there was a member of the Dora Milaje named Queen Divine Justice, and she was of Wakandan descent. She was actually, I think, of the Jabari tribe, but she had grown up in Chicago. And so she had a very kind of like American personality. And so there was like this real cultural clash with her as a member of the Dora Milaje, contrasting with the Wakandans. And I feel like they brought a lot of her personality to Ironheart's character. I'm not sure, Corey, I know you're more familiar with the comics. Did you pick up any of that? Or if you know more about Ironheart, did she seem pretty close to you?
I really don't know much about Ironheart. Yeah, I think that there could have been more done with her backstory to help us figure out where she was coming from. I think that the problem is so many people, like Dana included, if I speak for her, is that they see the symbolism of Ironheart close to Iron Man using that same tech, that people may naturally think, oh, well, they're just going to make an Iron Girl because Iron Man is no longer around. Spoiler alert. But so I think that that's where the confusion, her whole technical background and things that she was doing with the suit is a little bit confusing and too similar to what Iron Man was also doing. But as far as like the comic book goes, like I don't really know much about Ironheart, and I haven't really read much with her in any of the comics. I have this Marvel Platinum Definitive Edition of Black Panther, and I know that writer is in some of these comics, but I haven't gotten to those yet.
Oh, okay. And going from there to Namor Kokakon, is he in the comics, and is he like we see him on screen? Or is this a whole kind of story for the movie?
Kind of both. So yeah, Namor is in the comics. He is Marvel's first published mutant character. And so just like in the comics, in the movies, he's the first named mutant in the MCU, right? We know that Kamala Khan is a mutant because they had that little tease at the end of her show. And, we saw the Professor X from the other world, but neither of them was officially called a mutant on screen. So Namor is the first one who's actually called a mutant on screen. So I thought that was a nice nod to the comics. But in the comics, he is basically the same origin as Aquaman, although he came before Aquaman. But
Right.
he's Prince of Atlantis, child of two worlds, right? His mother was of, I think it was his mother. Yeah, his mother was of Atlantis. His father was human. And that's why he was a mutant. So all of that comes straight from the comics. And obviously, if you're going to do Namor the way he is in the comics, then everybody who's not familiar with the comics is going to be like, Marvel's just ripping off Aquaman. So I thought they were very smart in how they did it, where they brought in this whole idea of making him of Mayan descent, linking that in with Mayan mythology, calling it Talokan instead of Atlantis. All of that was explicitly for the movie, but I thought it worked really well with his character. It helped set him apart from Aquaman, and it still manages to keep his core tenets, because Namor just in the comics is also like this kind of an anti-hero type, whereas Aquaman's always been has much more friendly relations with the surface world. Namor has been at times attacking it. Like that was what he did in his very first appearances. When they brought him back in the Fantastic Four decades later, that's what he did as well. So he's been an on again, off again enemy of humanity. And I thought they had done a really good job of capturing the nuances of his character and linking that into the themes of colonialism was all very smart.
Yeah. And since we've all talked about it in our kind of journey back to Wakanda, let's talk about this new Panther. Yeah, from the bit that I know, Shuri is written in the comics as, I don't know if she's the next Black Panther after T'Challa kind of thing, but she's there. And there was a big kind of, I wouldn't say it was a controversy, but there was a lot of talk about, should we recast T'Challa? There were people that were in the recast T'Challa camp. There were people in the make somebody else Black Panther, we don't know who. And then there were people in the camp that were, Shuri's the next one in the comic books, you need to follow the comic books kind of thing. So since everybody's kind of brought it up in one way or another, and Dana bringing it up kind of most of all, what did we think? Chime in and tell me what you thought about Shuri being a new Black Panther and about not recasting Chadwick. What were your thoughts versus what was everybody else saying, or what, whatever? What were your personal thoughts about it? What did you want to see? And did it meet your expectations? Dana, you were the last person to talk about this. Do you have anything to add on to what you were saying about this?
No, it's just like I said before. I feel like the sister should have stayed the tech person, and I think I told Corey she's kind of like, what is it, the Q and James Bond or whatever. Like that's her thing. That's where she really excels. And I felt like she should have stayed in her lane. And then I know some people wanted, give me if I'm not calling these characters by their names, because I know I would mess them up and I don't remember anyway. But some people had talked about maybe Chad Boseman's characters. I want to say, I don't know if they got married or not, which is, I don't know if they got married or not, but let's just say his wife or whatever, because I'm trying to not get the Indian way. But I thought it should be her, which I thought didn't make any sense either. I just felt like, again, I'll be honest with you, I thought this movie tried to be a little woke and it was getting on my nerves. This movie was so girl power, girl, that I was just like, I had enough. Between the girl Iron Man and now we're gonna have the girl Black Panther and do that. I was like, what are we doing? Are we trying?
We're making a good movie. That's what we're doing.
We're what?
Okay, Staci. She said we're making a good movie. That's what we're doing.
Maybe. I mean, perhaps, but I felt like, I'll tell you, me watching, I felt like it was being thrown down my throat a little bit. Again, why would you pick her? There were other women that were much stronger and who were actually warriors that you could have picked. Like, I don't know. I felt like it was like, women in STEM.
but I think you also gotta look at it from the perspective of legacy.
Exactly.
Why not her? If
because
that's your familiar birthright, then
legacy
why not her?
Good at it. And I think
legacy doesn't make a warrior, though. It's like, I'm gonna be honest. If y'all had to pick who was gonna go fight for you, you would not have picked her. because it didn't make any sense. And so that's what I'm saying, is that kind of stuff bothers me, because why did you make that choice? And it can't just, legacy to me can't just be enough, because I thought, like, and y'all can tell me I'm
it
wrong.
wasn't enough. I mean, there was legacy, there was the heart and the willingness to do it.
She
and there
didn't
was,
have
let's be
that.
She
honest,
didn't want to
did
do
not
it,
want to
though.
do it.
She didn't want to.
Well, I mean, she didn't
I
want
didn't
to,
say
but I
want.
get it.
I said willing. I didn't say want. They're two different things.
No,
There's a lot of times.
She didn't even show up sometimes. I don't think she, and to me, again, here, you want somebody to represent you, to be a warrior, to fight for you and stand for you. I mean, you know, whatever. We can make you dumb down as the president of your country who doesn't want to be there. Like, why would I don't want you. I mean, people don't want me at work if I don't want to be there. At my job, I'm not protecting anybody. Can you imagine a warrior who's supposed to show strength, and I guess the role model that everybody doesn't really want to be there, which is good because she knows she'll probably get killed because she's not good.
Well, I just think the reason why she didn't, not saying she didn't want to be, well, she didn't want to be there, but I think her growing up with her father being the Black Panther, then her brothers being the Black Panther. And I know you said it's wokeness, but I just think that if you have a family history, like Marcia said, it's a legacy. Whether you want to take on the mantle or not, sometimes things are pushed upon you and that you have to pick it up regardless. That's your responsibility. And maybe she didn't want the responsibility initially, but if she was raised how she was raised by her mother, who took on the mantle of a queen, her mother was queen by what? Marriage? We don't know if she was
by marriage, yeah.
By marriage. So, but you see how she took on that role and responsibility. And like she says, I gave up my whole family for this. I think that.
But I think they should have showed that.
Same thing.
They would have need to show me that character being like, look, this isn't what I want to do, but for my legacy and my family, this is what I have to do. I'm going to be training. I'm going to be
by
doing
having
this.
her do that.
No,
I mean, I think we saw
even
that
in the very,
she
never wanted to do
but
this.
She
not at all.
I think part of the thing about the movie is that we saw that she struggled during the whole time, because her mother's like, how I felt your brothers, you know, and she was like, you, and she just put it, it's all scientific. She struggled that spiritual aspect versus that science aspect. And I think we saw that during the whole film of her struggling with her emotions and what her responsibilities were or should be. I think we saw that throughout the whole movie. And I think that's what made her compelling as the Black Panther, because it wasn't a mantle she wanted to take, but how many people really want to take on that responsibility? How hard that would be. We saw that.
Well, there were obviously people who did want to. There were people who wanted to take it on. They fought for it in the first movie. Like,
well, no, I don't think they really fought for it to be a protector. I mean, he wasn't trying to protect Wakanda. He was trying to make the world burn, and that was what he was going to do to get it. I'm not.
But what about M'Baku's character too? I feel like he wanted it more than she did. Like, well, I don't know.
I don't think that's true. I think he wanted to lead his people, but I don't think he wanted to be Black Panther. And spoiler alert that it is. I think that there's a defining line in this movie where you have to decide if she really wanted to be both. And I think that's the conflict, is did she really want to be the Black Panther that her brother had to be, that her father had to be. And I think the bravest part was when she decided that she didn't want both mantles and she would only carry one. And so I think that is part of the struggle. But I think we see heroes that don't want to be heroes all the time. I mean, Thor didn't want to be Thor half the time. I think
but
in a
Thor
lot of
was
places,
trained to be Thor. We're not acting like it's just her being willing. It's also her being able. She had neither one of those. Movie magic is the only reason she isn't dead. Like, go ahead.
I want to push back on that a little bit, because we do see her in the first movie. She joins in the battle. Like, they do hint at the fact that she's gotten
that's
training.
what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say.
She fought. She fought when
she was right beside him.
She fought Killmonger. She got out there with the rest of her people. I don't think it's that she lacks it.
In Endgame too, she also fought.
Exactly.
I haven't seen that.
She did.
But
fight.
She's still not, to me. To me, that makes her maybe a warrior to stand there and be one of the soldiers, not captain. Like, she just, to be Black Panther, are you joking me? And did you not see her? And she wasn't even, oh God. No part of that worked for me. Like, I was upset because I felt like they did that because people just thought, I guess the whole legacy thing. Oh, that's what should happen. But I just thought it really wasn't realistic. Here you are fighting against somebody who has, I don't know if you want to call them supernatural, magical power, whatever. This is just a regular person who's strong. And I felt like what she could have done is I would have preferred her. I know she worked on the suit and did all that other stuff. That's her area of expertise. I don't like when we're trying to make people something they're not. And then on top of it, I'm not really getting from the character that is what they wanted to do. It felt forced. And if y'all don't feel like it felt forced, then we just watch different movies. Because it totally felt forced.
I think we did, because I thought that was, for me, that was her whole character journey. I mean, T'Challa was, in the first movie, T'Challa was someone who was very much between these two worlds, right? One of the big themes in the first movie was this idea about modernization versus tradition. And T'Challa is someone who is very respectful of tradition, but also understands the need to modernize. Whereas Shuri is someone who is very much got her eye on the future. So she, and especially after losing her brother, she had almost completely rejected tradition as a result of that. And she kept trying to move forward, to push forward, to find new ways of doing things. And when that didn't work, when, you know, her mother gets killed and her brother gets killed, and now she realizes that she has to find a different way. And as far as the abilities, I mean, she's got the magic herb. It does more than just make her stronger than a normal person. It is superhuman strength. It is the Wakandan equivalent of the super soldier serum. So everything Captain America can do, T'Challa and Shuri now can both do as well. So, I mean, you can make the same argument. She doesn't look like it. Well, Gal Gadot doesn't look like she could, you know, wrestle tanks, but she managed to do it because
but that's not
we
true.
buy the magic of it.
She absolutely does, more so than she looks like she would be the Black Panther. I'm not trying to get up into people's bodies and what they look like, but the girl looked like she could be knocked over by a blow of the wind. She has it just, I mean, it could have been a 5-year-old child, I guess, who took the herb, and could have been Black Panther too. And I guess, again, y'all have to realize I'm also coming from a place of, I don't know all their little out stories. If it wasn't in the movie, I don't know anything about it. So let's look at it like that too. And for me, it did not make sense. If this really was to be her arc and this is her storyline, then I think I never felt her come around to really wanting to do this. Like, I never felt that. And then I got confused.
I think the defining moment was when she chose to be Black Panther and not be Queen. I think that is if you didn't recognize her choice in that
I don't
moment,
think she wanted to do either one of those. Like,
she chose.
She would rather have her brother there, but she chose to be the
Black Panther. And
because who else would have done it? Like, I didn't get
I think she chose by default.
Yeah, thank you. Like, I don't know who else. Like, if you were like, well, you could be queen. Your people out here dying about to be king. You want to be queen, or you gonna go out here and fight for us with the suit that potentially you could win? Like, I don't know what kind of that would have been selfish to be like, I'll be your queen.
Yeah, but that's
somebody else.
That's the burden of heroism. In many hero stories, the hero does not choose to be a hero. They have that responsibility forced on them, and they have to choose to either do the right thing or abandon it completely. I mean, it's the classic hero story. It happens with Luke Skywalker, it happens with Spider-Man, happens with Superman. It's something that is forced upon them, and they have to choose if they're going to accept it or reject it. And I think it's the same thing with Shuri. Yes, it's forced on her. Yes, it's something that she doesn't want to do, but she does it because she knows that's her responsibility.
And I guess for me, I just, that being her character, because I totally agree with what you said, it just didn't work for me. Like, I think because I guess I felt like with Chadwick Boseman's character, he was the Black Panther. He, you know, I know it took time for him to get to that place, but I felt like he knew that's where he wanted to be, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, he had time to decide that even though
I'm not debating any of that. I'm just telling you that I didn't. Her character just didn't work for me. It was, but it's that time that got him right to be in that position. I felt like, again, so many people wanted her to be the Black Panther. I just felt like that was a people decision, not, to me, not one that really made sense for the story. It just didn't work. Like, and speaking of time, we barely got to know her in the first movie. All I know is she's good at doing electronics and stuff like that. And then it seems like she's curing, let's say, cancer. I don't know what she was doing with all the molecules and all that other stuff. And so that's where I see her as, and I see her being great at that. Now let's say she steps away to do Black Panther. Now what? What happens to all of that stuff? Like, I just felt like, I guess to your point, Marcie, it was too rushed. Had there been more time for her to get there, maybe I could have bought it, but it was entirely too rushed. It was so too rushed for me. So I didn't feel her character doing that. But I mean, again,
And I think to piggyback on what you're saying, Dana, is that I feel like the time that would have been there would have been the time that they dedicated to Namor's origin and to that culture. All that time is the time that they probably would have spent with her building up to be the Black Panther. But just to piggyback on what you're saying, I agree with you. Is that I felt like for me, it didn't work either. I felt like with the writing, the way that the film was going, even though this is not legacy, and even though this is not how the character was built in the comics, they wrote it for Okoye to be the Black Panther, to be honest with you. That's how I took the film because you have Okoye there, they strip her of her rank. She is basically, abandoned from Wakanda. I felt like, okay, now what do we do? She's a soldier. She's been there with Chadwick this whole time. She's been there with T'Challa fighting all these battles. Naturally, give it to her and have her be the next Black Panther. Why does it have to stay with the legacy of the family? And then you have Shuri become the queen. Like that's how I felt that they were writing the film. That's how it played out for me. And so when it didn't happen that way, I personally was
Yeah.
a little bit disappointed
Yeah.
because I was like,
Okoye kind of had she kind of had you can disagree with me on this, but she kind of had like a Wolverine kind of feel. Like she
yeah,
was gonna come up and yeah, yeah.
right.
I
And so it
I
just
felt like that was gonna happen, but it didn't happen. So
I don't
yeah.
right.
know if
So
I
if you
thought that all that was going to happen, and I don't know if it was intentional, but I do feel like they left Okoye very unfinished. Like I said, some of the stuff that
Yeah.
didn't make it into the
right.
movie, I feel like should have been. I don't know that I saw her as Black Panther at any time during the movie, but I do feel like her
Well,
story was
you
very
don't
much
feel like
unfinished.
it you don't feel like it until after that happens. You don't feel like it until after that rank is taken away from her and her power is taken away from her. And because of the relationship that they built between the two of them in the first film and all the things that she did in the
Yes.
beginning of this film, it just felt like naturally that's what was going to happen. If you go back and you watch it again and you pay attention to the dialogue, you pay attention to the writing
Mm-hmm.
of what they were doing, you will see that that's what was going to happen in the third act. And so when it
Yeah.
doesn't, that payoff wasn't there for me. I was kind of like what Dana was saying. It was like this isn't fitting for Shuri to just fit into that role. I'm kind of annoyed with the fact that, you know, I think it's a weird situation that producers and directors have of comic book movies is that they have a responsibility to take these characters and keep them with the legacy that comic book fans know, right? Because they're the ones who are more than likely going to go see these films are the people who have read these comics, have studied these comics, have appreciated these comics for years and years and years and years and years, right? So they have a
Yeah.
responsibility
They're the
to,
core audience. They're the
they're the
ones
core
who
audience.
know that's
So
gonna be there. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So you start there and then you bring the other people in. So it's a weird thing when you have to play with do I stay the course of what's written in the comics or do I try and do something a little bit different but hopefully satisfy both audiences, satisfy the comic book fans, satisfy the casual fans. I feel like they wrote Okoye's character and all the supporting cast well enough that they could have made some changes without upsetting the core audience. And then also accepting the fact that this is something new, this is something different, and everybody will still be happy. Because if Okoye's character was not as strong as she was in the first film, or in this beginning of this second film, then them writing them in her to be the next Black Panther would not have worked. But because they established that and they did that, they totally could have went that route, right? And then it leads others to believe that anybody can be the Black Panther. You don't have to be legacy to be Black Panther. It's just like anything else. If you see someone who is a hero and you live up to that hero, it's like anything else. It's like somebody being on screen and you see there was talks about a black Superman. Okay, if they made Michael B. Jordan the Black Superman, which was what was talked about for years, and they do that film, and he does a really great job, don't you know that there'll be little small black boys, little small black girls? They'll go, "Oh, I could be a Superman too because he looks just like me," and he's just as strong as Christopher Reeve's Black Man, Superman or whatever. It's the same thing. You put a Okoye in that role. You say, "Hey, you don't have to be part of this family. You don't have to be this legacy." But as long as you care about Wakanda, and as long as you're strong, and as long as you have faith in this and da 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 da, you can be Black Panther too. See what I'm saying? So that's how I took it. So I was a little bit disappointed with Sherry being Black Panther, but it is what it is. I mean, I don't know if they're going to continue to do that moving forward because of what we see at the end, but that's just my opinion.
So first off, the Black Superman is still in development. Ta-Nehisi Coates recently confirmed that he is
That's
still
good
writing
to know.
it.
Thank you very much.
It's going to be one of the, because James Gunn is doing two different types of things, right? They're doing the regular DC Universe movies, but then they're going to have Elseworlds things, which are not in continuity. So the Batman stuff is still going forward. The Joker movies are still going forward, and Black Superman is still going forward. So we're still going to get that. So that is definitely going to happen. Whether or not it's Michael B. Jordan, I don't know, but there is still a Black Superman movie in development. Ta-Nehisi Coates is writing it. So that's happening. Now, if you had asked me before this movie, who do you think should take up Black Panther? I would agree with you. Even though Shuri was in the comics, I would say that Okoye or M'Baku would have been better choices. But after seeing this movie, and especially having that core conflict between Shuri and Namor, I think if you don't have that final battle between them, as much as I get what you're saying about Okoye, I think you lose something with that if that final battle is not between Shuri and Namor.
Staci, you have your mic open and you've had it open for a while. Did we miss what you wanted to say? Because I know Dana was talking about. No, you and Dana were talking about it, but did we miss something that you were going to contribute to the?
We did, and now I've forgotten it. So
okay, great. I'm sorry, but I know when you first had your mic open, Dana was talking about the woke part, and I wanted to kind of chime in there. As far as the woke part, or the having women everywhere kind of thing, I did not feel that here as much as I felt it when they had that scene that could have been deleted from, was that Endgame? Where all the women superheroes or whatever were fight. Yes.
Yeah, and even Pepper Potts showed up for the first time in forever long. Yes.
Exactly. Now that was a scene. Yeah, that was a scene. Oh, okay. She hadn't seen that one. Okay. That was a scene that was forced down. I feel like that was a forced women woke scene. And maybe this is just cultural for me, and especially with the Dora Milaje, they're the army, right? And they're all women. So it was kind of, I didn't feel that like as much as I think Dana felt it, the whole they're forcing the women everywhere down our throats kind of thing. I didn't feel that as much there. And then too, a lot of the male characters that we saw in the first Black Panther, they're not here.
That's why I felt that way.
Well, but they're not here because they're dead. It's not because, and the women have to take up the mantle kind of thing. To me, and I hate to say this like this, but to me, a strong Black women in leadership roles kind of thing is what I grew up with. I'm not saying that my father wasn't strong or anything like that. I had strong male role models, but having to take up the mantle when the males are not there is not something it doesn't feel forced to me. It feels like, okay, this is what we do. Culturally, it feels like this is what we do. Now, the whole thing with them being in STEM.
I'm joking.
Now, them being as still, I know you were joking about that, but I do want to seriously say though that we don't see that a lot on screen. The last time we really saw it was Hidden Figures. And with Hidden Figures, those were real women, but we just don't see it a lot on screen. And I'm like cheering for it, a little bit.
I agree.
Because
I don't think it didn't feel forced to me either, in that it was simply, I think in the context of the story, it just really showed how community has to come together when you lose the people in certain positions. And I think it was to see Queen Ramonda step up and take up that mantle of leadership, but she still had the rest of the council. I think I didn't feel like it was forced,
So let me
again, because the
ask you.
Dora Milaje was a all-female guard that precedent had already been set. So I guess for me it didn't feel quite the same way.
Ask you this because I think it's a good point that Yvonne brought up, that in your real life this seems normal, right? And I think in Black communities, and I hate to bring this up, but I'm going to, there's often the thought that as women we have to take over roles that sometimes in other cultures may more traditionally belong to men or whatever. We have to be everybody's everything all the time, so we do step in and we do take over. So that may be one of the reasons it may feel more normal to us, right? So the ideal of me thinking, hey, we can build this world where that, I'll call it a stereotype, I don't know how y'all feel with this stereotype or not, but doesn't have to be what it is in real life. It still showed up here. The reason I say it was woke jokingly is not because I really feel like necessarily they were like women, like this isn't a feminist movie or anything like that. It's just, I was like, seriously, what happens to all the males? Like
Right.
they're,
but I
other than the bad guy supposedly, whatever, I felt like everybody was gone. And then M'Bako's role, whatever, he was seriously, I felt like he was there for jokes and laughter. Like I felt like he was so downplayed. I was just like, oh, okay. And I just felt like it was a lot of women, and it wasn't, so that community, I felt like it was women. And I don't feel like that's what.
But I think you also got to realize that women are what is left after war. Women are what is left after.
Yeah, but that's not that wasn't the case, I feel like, here.
So, but the context, but you forget that the context of the universe, of the Marvel universe, is that yes, T'Challa is gone, but they've also, that's coming off the heels of all of the devastation of
the snap,
Killmonger, and all of that.
Yeah, but you can't. Yeah, but you can't do that if people haven't seen those other films.
Okay,
and then explain the ending.
But again,
then
not my fault. Not my fault. You didn't watch them in order, and this is one of those things.
What do you mean, watch it in order?
No, just not watch it at all.
I watched it in order. It's not my fault. You watched other movies that had nothing to do with this particular one. The other movies weren't Black Panther. You may have picked up other stuff. Again,
no, but even in Black Panther, they had
Marcie,
all
we're
of
not
that
here
war.
to discuss the Marvel cinematic, all the movies. We're talking about this particular movie. If it can't hold its own, and you're telling me, oh, I need to have watched 15 other movies to get it.
I'm saying even if you only watch the original Black Panther, there was a war at the end where Killmonger was killed, but there were lots of lives lost on the field, and the majority.
But there are lots of men left too.
But the women were the fighters. So
not for every tribe though.
That shouldn't have
not
been
for every tribe. But every tribe was not women. The Dora Milaje were women, but the Border tribe was not women.
Here's the thing, Marcie. I don't think anybody thinks that the reason there were just women in this movie is because all the men were dead. I don't think that's anything anybody was trying to. I just said I noticed, and I did, and we all did, because there were only women there. I was just like, what happened to all the guys? And then if I am trying to be feministy or whatever, then why at the end did we have to go back to a guy? Like, couldn't that be his daughter? Like, I don't know. I just felt some kind of weird about it. I was just, and again, I'm sure y'all didn't notice everything. We all go to the movies, and kind of like Yvonne said, where we are in the world and what's going on. But in the world we live in, everybody's so PC. Talk about this and that. Everybody, sometimes I feel like it's being forced down our throats. And I just thought wow, I didn't feel this way in the first movie. And yes, we still had a lot. It was very women centric. We still had the queen, matriarch, whatever. But somehow in this second movie, the only two guys that I can even remember from it, one was a villain and the other one was, like I said, was barely there. It just felt weird.
OMG, that was a heated discussion. You have to stay tuned for part 2 of Wakanda Forever. And while you're waiting, check out my website at nerdyromanticspodcast.com. And while you're there, sign up for our newsletter, which will give you all the show notes of our episodes right in your inbox. Thank you for listening.